We thank you, dear Master, and so be it. So, good evening, everyone. Today, Leo will be talking about parable of the Good Shepherd, and it is already 5 past. Leo, I'm not going to take up any more time. Please.
Good afternoon and good evening for those who will be joining us soon. And happy, as always, to be here giving continuation to this series of talks that we are working on. That we are working on to bring some enlightenment for ourselves and many others in terms of Jesus' teaching. Thus far, we have covered several other ones. But it has been parables. And about a month ago, I was talking to a friend, and we are discussing this parable, right, of the Good Shepherd. Many of us also get confused with the parable of the lost sheep, right, in terms of between these two parables, because it do relate to one another in terms of the analogy of the sheep, the lost sheep, the shepherd and the sheep and whatnot, but they are different, and that is interesting because, talking to some other friends as well, when we mentioned that we were going to talk about the parable of the Good Shepherd, um, unanimously, our friends were like, "Huh, never heard of it." And there's so much out there. There's so many parables that if we that we can extend this work for many more months, perhaps more than a year, that we will still not be able to cover all, especially if we wanted to cover as well the other teachings that is not considered a parable, right? And we have Emmanuel, we have other authors as well that have actually worked diligently to bring Jesus' teachings to us, just by taking an excerpt of a chapter, not studying a whole chapter, not studying a parable and whatnot, and bring us, wonder, especially Emmanuel with the book Living Spring, with the Living Spring collections, right? So, in any case, the parable of the Good Shepherd. We want to, as usual, read the whole parable and highlight a couple of things, and then we're going to go and kind of work in two parts, right? So that we can make some connections to what Spiritism brings to us as well, and most importantly, to try to understand what Jesus is actually mentioning to us. If you understand something else, if you have read it, please share with me, because I'd like to know as well. And I say this because as we study these parables, at least I love to dive into many other authors. And I say authors because there are many scholars out there that sit down and truly study, and they write papers on some of these parables and some of the verses of the chapter that we're discussing, and they go on and on and on in a very beautiful and eloquent teaching and what they understood. So it's important that we also share what we understand as well. So I also would like to highlight, as you can see here, it's kind of small, so don't really hurt your eyes. I will read, but before we start reading, in some versions, we see the parable only from in John 10, from verses 1 through 19. Okay? There's also another highlight that I would like to bring before we start reading, is that Jesus, when he was actually saying these words, he was actually saying to the Pharisees. In this version that I bring here, the New American Standard Bible version, it doesn't say in the first verse that Jesus was actually saying was talking to the Pharisees. But I wanted to say this because, as we analyze a little bit more later on, I will bring the Pharisees, or at least the picture of the Pharisees, back to our discussion. Okay, so you were not lost, Leo. Where were the Pharisees, right? But in this version, they're not there. And again, we kept 20 and 21 because we saw that it was actually important, as well as some of the versions are actually included. So, what is the parable? Very interesting. Truly, truly, I say to you, the one who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep, but climbs up some other way, he is a thief and a robber. But the one who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. To him, the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep listens to his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he pulls all his own sheep outside, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follows him because they know his voice. However, a stranger they simply will not follow, but will flee from him, because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus told them this figure of speech, but they did not understand what the things which he was saying to them meant. So Jesus said to them again, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All those who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came so that they would have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf snatches them and scatters the flock. He flees because he is a hired hand and does not care about the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them out also. And they will listen to my voice, and they will become one flock with one shepherd. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life so that I may take it back. No one has taken it away from me, but I lay it down on my own. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it back. This commandment I received from my Father. Dissension occurred among the Jews because of these words. Many of them were saying, he has a demon and is insane. Why do you listen to him? Others were saying, these are not the words of one who is demon possessed. A demon cannot open the eyes of those who are blind, can it? And once more, we'll go into the discussion why we also kept verse 20 and 21, even though some of them does not include, right? Interesting that we see that down here, down towards the end, we see that, well, towards the middle, we see that we see that Jesus had to repeat himself a couple of times, right? We see also that Jesus created dissension among the Jews, and the Jews that they were actually mentioning here were the Pharisees, as in some versions they were saying. But it's quite a bit, isn't it? I mean, if we read this, this is the first time we're reading this year. It's like, what is it talking about? Well, let's find out. And it's confusing. It can be confusing, right? We have to really dive into it. And even after we discuss it today, we invite everyone to go read again, analyze it, take your time, breathe, right? And then read again. Because there's so much into this that we can go into, but we'll try to keep it concise so that we can at least get the foundation out of it, right? So as we like to usually do, what are the parties involved outside of the parable? This is outside of the parable, right? Not in the parable as we see mentioned here. Jesus, and I also added here the Pharisees, and I entered them, right, as the Jews over here, right? They did not listen, right? So As if Christ is speaking to this group of people, or the individuals, and they did not listen, right? And I forgot to mention here, the Jews, they were, dissension was created amongst the Jews, right? So I think it's important for us to picture, okay, who is he speaking to? Because then we kind of understand also the tone, what he was saying, right? And most importantly, why is Jesus speaking of a shepherd? Why is Jesus speaking of the sheep? Right? Why is Jesus saying that there are others that are not in among the flock yet that he would like to bring in? Right? So all of these things will make sense as we analyze who is involved. So, what are the parties involved in the parable? We saw the shepherd, the thieves, the robbers, the doorkeeper, the stranger, right? The hired hand, someone who was hired, the father, the Jews, I added the Jews here, and the demon, right? So we don't have to answer now, but quickly, as we repeat it again, what are these individuals? Not only the parable, but I also would like to bring them to life, to our life. Who is our shepherd? What is a shepherd to you? What are the thieves, right? What are the robbers? The doorkeeper, the stranger, the higher hand, the father, right? And I'm talking about God, right? The Jews and the demon. What are these elements? Because it's really interesting keeping it to its essence of its time, as Jesus brought to us, but that doesn't really help us much if we only keep it at that essence, right? Of that true essence. We have to bring it to our lives. We have to take these characters and say, who are they in my personal life today? Am I connected to some of these parties, right? Am I involved with some of them? Am I mentally or spiritually, morally connected to some of them, right? And quite sure we are, but we're going to talk more about that. What about the elements involved in the parable? The sheep, the wolf, fold of the sheep, which we'll understand a little bit more what that is, right? The location, it's undisclosed. There are several possibilities here. We don't know where it is. I mean, in some occasions that it's given to us where he was speaking to us in terms of the physical arrangement, the location by the sea, in the mountains or whatever it is, right? Inside of someone's house, right? As we see Neo Lucio talking about the teachings of Christ at Peter's home, right? So there are several ways for us to analyze this. In this case, it's not there, but I always like to bring this. So this is the moment that I ask you, thus far, have we learned anything? Anything at all? Okay, Kirsten is shaking her head. You want to say it? Something that, where is it? Oh, there it is. Anything.
Yeah.
There's no wrong and right or right.
I mean, at this point, I would say I've learned that no matter what, the shepherd will always oversee its sheep, no matter what happens, no matter if it just one sheep gets out of line and it has to go back. And the hired hand won't be like the shepherd. We'll do the opposite.
Thank you. Anyone else? Jeanette?
I'm gonna know the voice of the shepherd. I'm gonna know him by his voice.
Interesting. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Those are good points, and I'm glad that you guys are paying attention. So let's keep that in mind. The shepherd will always be there for the sheep, as Kirsten said, right? And Jeanette said that. Well, Kirsten also mentioned that the higher hand will not do the same job, right? And Jeanette then mentioned that we will recognize the voice of the shepherd. They're great points. So, as I'd like to ask, who is the shepherd here? Jesus. Okay. All right. It's Jesus, right? I mean, he's saying, I am the shepherd. I mean, it's straight to the point. Who does the sheep represent? Followers. Us, as Kirsten is saying. Us. Yes, us, humanity. Followers, yes. Not a TikTok follower, but what does the fold of the sheep represent? We need to understand what the fold of the sheep is, right? Oh yeah, we're gonna get there. I should have brought this question. Now it's like learning as we go. But it's the kingdom of God. It's planet Earth. It's our home. It's the Spiritist Center. It's anywhere. But we're gonna try to understand a little bit more, and that's what I would like to do. Although there are many elements that we would like to go into it, in terms of what the thief, the robbers, the doorkeeper, the stranger, and whatnot. We're gonna kind of like talk about it, not in too much, but let us try to understand some of these very important points. Starting with the shepherd, we already know that the shepherd is who? Jesus, right? He is saying that he's the shepherd, and they didn't understand. We don't understand yet. And I include, I say we, meaning especially me, that we barely understand the essence of the Spirit that we have received to guide us. It's very hard. And I'm not saying this in a negative way, but the more I go into these teachings, it's like, wow. And it's not that I distance myself from Christ, but I see him very far. And the more I want to understand this essence, right? Because for somebody to be in sync with the sheep, as well as to be in sync with God, it's just, I lack words to describe what that is, right? To be this mediator of love between us and our Creator. But more to come on that. So, why did he use the idea of a shepherd, right? Because it was common at the time. It's something that at the time, they were farmers, right? We had to really take care of these animals to make sure that, we're doing a million things. We're going to get to the sheep soon, but what would it be a shepherd today? An example, huh? A leader. But what kind of leader? Let's make this more practical. A spiritual leader. Okay, a spiritual leader. What else? A corporation. A father. What else? A teacher, a pastor, right? We said some of it. I know it's too small there. Daniel's probably looking at me like, Leo, really? Can you make it bigger? But an educator, folks. It's that humble heart that really educates. Okay, come over here, right? Come in this way, follow me. And that educator that just by speaking, everybody quiets down, right? And I've seen some teachers of, not kindergarten, mid-grade, whatever, when the teacher comes in the room, everybody quiets down. It's that respect that they know that they have for that individual, right? And I'm including educator and teacher, but educator can be anyone that is teaching something, right? Not the actual profession as a teacher, and including the profession too. A doctor. If you go to the doctor and the doctor say, follow these steps, right? Whether he's being paid or not to do that, but follow these steps so that you can get better. You can have health, right? You can have life abundantly, right? A doctor. Kirsten said, a father, a mother, and a father. Why not? But why again? Or a brother or sister, someone who's guiding, an older sister, an older brother, right? But at that time, these things had value, obviously, for sure, right? Not as some of today, for example, an educator, a teacher, there weren't so many schools, right? Doctor was actually somebody who knew how to mix, some herbs and give it to that person, spell the demon out of that individual, right? But the shepherd was everything. That individual, again, it was everything, right? And there's more that we're going to understand in terms of why that is, right? So we brought this last time. What is the shepherd for us? The closest and the most admirable, not the entire perfect things, because there are several other teachings or understanding of Jesus that are very, let's say, beautiful as well. But Spiritism brings to us and tells us that Jesus is the most perfect standard that God has offered to humankind as a guide and model. I'll say it again. The most perfect standard that God has offered to humankind as a guide and model. And it goes on to say that Jesus is the highest standard of moral perfection to which humankind may aspire on earth. God offers him as the most perfect model, and the doctrine he taught is the purest expression of God's law, because he was animated by the divine spirit and was the purest being that has ever walked on earth. So when we look at this, is okay, if you want to get closer to God, follow Jesus. There are others that we can follow. There are other teachers out there, right? But the most perfect one is this standard that we have seen. We also learn through Spiritism that he's also one of the governor of planet Earth, right? So that if we think about it, all of these other shepherds, that a lot of them we consider them shepherds, right? Is under the guidance of the shepherd. And some of us may not like the idea, right? It's okay. One day we will see that perhaps we'll get to under the same, let's say, understanding, right? Same umbrella, where we will not see the actual person, Jesus, but what he's teaching us. And that's what's going to get us closer to God, closer under the same teachings as well. And then we will talk more about this as well. And then Spiritism, without us, trying to connect this in any way, shape, or form, but it connects, right? Tells us that if some of those intended to teach the law, other shepherds, to humankind have sometimes led them astray with erroneous principles, it is because they allowed themselves to be dominated by strong earthly sentiments, and because they confuse the laws regulating the conditions of life of the soul with those regulating the life of the body. Many of them presented as divine laws what were really only human ones, created to serve their own passions and to dominate others. Keep that in mind, because we're not going to talk about it now, but we want to understand something else in order for us to get back to this passage over here. It's not saying that some of these individuals, like us, they don't have a good heart. But the thing is, we confuse our moral laws with the physical laws. And the shepherd-like inside of us is to fulfill our physical needs, our necessities right now, pride and selfishness, right? More to come, because I don't want to lose in, let's now dive into the sheep. Why we know that Jesus was using the idea of shepherd now, and that he was a shepherd. We are the sheep, right? We are those listening, and okay, I hear this voice. And sometimes we don't hear the voice of Jesus yet. We hear other voices, right? There are other shepherds in our lives they're not good shepherds, but we listen, that's the voice that we're listening, right? And then we find out that they leave us astray, right? But what is the importance of a sheep at that time? If you think about it, still nowadays, the sheep does what, right? We have wool, we get wool from it, we get milk, skin, meat, we can trade, right? Sheep with other animals, or perhaps other things that we cannot produce, right? Is that the trade nowadays that we do with money, right? And at that time as well, there was the sacrifice, right? Of sacrificing that animal for something else, for the gods or for a god, whatever there was, right? So the importance of this animal then, and still nowadays, was tremendous. But back then, is if you had money in your account, if you had a sheepfold and you had 100 of them, right? That was immense. That was huge. That was having a six-figure job nowadays, right? Where we're making money. Because look how much you can get out of it. And that is constantly, right? I shouldn't say constantly, but for quite some time, as long as you maintain, as long as you are the good shepherd, right? The fold of the sheep. Meet the fold of the sheep. That's what it is right there. Should make it bigger for you can see it, right? when we go into this idea of the sheep listening to the shepherd and knowing the voice, because in many cases, what you see here in the sheepfold, this enclosure, and there are circle ones, around ones, and whatnot, with this little gate that the sheep can go in and out, right? They don't jump. It's not like in our dreams, the sheep jumping from one place to the other. But you see that, it's the enclosure that you have there. And sometimes what I got to know about this sheepfold is that there were several flocks there, not necessarily from the same shepherd. And that the one of the shepherds would call whatever call they had at the time, and only the sheep that belonged to him would come. The other that belonged to another shepherd would stay. And this is the gatekeeper over here. The shepherd would sit down to listen to anything that would come, the wolves, the thieves, right? That would come and try to steal them. Because that was what was happening at the time, as it is happening today too, right? Now, we look at it and say, okay, so they couldn't jump. It was this enclosure area to keep them safe and everything. Obviously, they probably had some pasture inside where they could eat to maintain it, right? But most likely they would have come out during the day so they can go and eat, right? And the shepherd would do this diligent work to really maintain the sheep together, right? So hopefully now we understand a little bit more, right? So when we go back, and we're going to dive into it now, and we talk about the shepherd that doesn't go through the front door, the shepherd that is not on the front, the shepherd that is jumping the sheepfold, right? What does that mean to us? Does it have a different meaning now that we understand? It's a little bit more clear, right? So we have to dive into why Jesus was, using this of this figure of this whole thing to teach those individuals of the time. But if Jesus was here with us today, he wouldn't be speaking of the sheepfold. He would be speaking of something else. Because we would be thinking about technology, right? Right? Parable of the influencer. Thank you. That would be perhaps the name of the parable nowadays, right? And we can even change this. I mean, as long as obviously we get something positive out of it, right? Or help others too. Always like to include that as well. Not only helping ourselves, but also helping others after we help ourselves. So now that it makes a little bit more sense, I want to read this again, just so we can kind of connect to what we're going to read. If some of those who intended to teach the law of the God to humankind have sometimes led them astray with erroneous principles, it is because they allowed themselves to be dominated by strong earthly sentiments. And because they confuse the laws regulating the conditions of life of the soul with those regulating the life of the body. Many of them presented as divine laws what they were really only human ones, created to serve them, created to serve their own passions and to dominate others. Just keep that in mind. So, going back to the actual parable, truly, truly I said to you, the one who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep, but climbs up some other way, he is a thief or a robber. But the one who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep listens to his voice, and he calls his own sheep by the name and leads them out. When he puts all of his own sheep outside, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. However, a stranger, they simply will not follow, but will flee from him because they do not know the voice of the stranger. I'll put Daniel in a spot over here. Daniel, have you ever seen your parents jumping, not going through the front door, jumping the window? No. And I say this because I had the pleasure and the honor to meet Daniel's parents, and they were, to me at least, and the teachings that Daniel mentions to me that he passed along to Daniel were really interesting, to say the least, right? Very firm, but godlike in terms of guiding him as a son to become a good individual. And we don't, he just answered. He never saw his parents jump in the window. And I make this funny analogy because we go back to the parent. The parent leads us through where? Through the front door, right? To be a dignified individual, to be a good person. And we hear them. We hear them through what? Examples. We hear them through what? Hard work, persistence, consideration, reconsideration when there is a problem, right? And what is the gospel of Jesus teaching us? All of these things plus, right? All of these things and much, much more that we're here trying to comprehend right now. So when we say that when that individual does not enter through the door, it can be that individual that comes and try to steal our good ways, right? By inciting on us something that is not divine. Something that will pretty much makes us work extra hard to fix it later on. Because sometimes we're given the ability, or free will, not sometimes, well, let's say most of the time, right? We're given the ability to do whatever we want because we have free will. But then we have to come back and fix the problem, whether in this reincarnation or reincarnations after, right? And that alone is a grace of God, right? To come and to allow us to come back and fix our issues. But I hope that this gives us a little bit of a better understanding of who this shepherd is, right? And the idea of listening, the sheep listening to the shepherd and saying, okay, this is my master. I have to follow it. Mind you, there were several other flocks inside, right, that wouldn't come out with that first call because that was not the shepherd. And once more, it's okay. Everybody is moving to the directions that they feel that is best for them right now. And I say this in terms of religion. We also can consider this in terms of our consideration in terms of materialistic ways, right? When Jesus is calling and we don't go, but we follow our materialistic ways in our lives. And that can go to anything, a workaholic, right? Oh, I'm going to work more because I need to make more money. Well, but what about the center, the things that I could be doing with my family, the things that I could do in terms of become a better individual, study, whatever that is, right? Is money everything? On planet Earth, it is a great chunk, but it's not everything. It depends on how we are allowing ourselves for that to become our shepherd, right? Again, we're not here to banish anything. We're not here to criticize, but for us to really, who are we listening to? What is the voice that we're listening to as a shepherd, right? To continue. This is the second part of it that I would like to dive into. And when it says, Jesus told them this figure of speech, but they did not understand what the things which he was saying to them meant. And he repeats. And this is when we come studying all the parables, studying all the books of Spiritism, studying and we still don't understand. We get a glimpse of it, right? Or sometimes, I would like to add here as well, that we listen, we try our best. But when we look around, that indignation comes to heart, right? If I can get this, why can this individual not get it? We become upset, right? Because we also feel that if I can understand this, others should understand. But everybody have their own time. Everybody will listen to it when they listen to it. Now, one thing that we have to take in consideration here, that Jesus on the second time, he's a little bit more firm. He gives a little bit more information to, okay, if you don't want to listen to me, this is what can happen, right? And as we see this as well in other teachings, right? He says, so Jesus said to them again, truly, truly, I said to you, I am the door of the sheep. Using the analogy to reemphasize, I am the door. There's no other door. If you don't come through me, it's not going to happen. All of those who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. Goes back to the teaching that we received from the Spirit's book, right? Because they were utilizing whatever teachings they could multiply to help others, for their own benefit, right? Many of us didn't follow, some of us have. And if we follow the wrong shepherd, perhaps we're here today, try to listen to the right one. Not to me, I'm talking about Jesus, right? I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. This is beautiful because when we talk about going in and out and find pasture, right? It's not that we will always be with Jesus 100% of the time. And I say this with our hearts, we will. But think about it in the morning. When we get up and we say our prayer, hopefully everyone say our prayers in the morning, if not, or some other time, right? We prepare ourselves to go to work and whatnot. Do we have to be praying the whole time until we get to work? And when we get to work, are we praying all the time? No, we do. We lead our lives righteously, hopefully, right? Being a good person. We go out of our sheepfold, if you will, and we come back. Fine. Not fine. I would say half fine. Because we encounter the difficulties of life, but that's great. But we go in and out with our hearts with joy, saying, thank you, God, for one more day, right? Because we have this faith. We have this guide and model with us telling us, persist, continue, right? And we always find pasture. Thank God, since we mentioned our jobs, leads us to have food in our tables, right? The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came so that you would life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. What happened to our Master Jesus? And we see this through a better representation, I would say, through the churches, right? That Jesus gave his life for us. To extend a little bit more, which we can always dive into another time, to wash off our sins, right? There's a little bit more that we need to understand on that, but I'm just saying here, because this is what we have been taught for ages, right? And he does. He did, and he does, right? Because the moment that we see the reconciliatory proposal of Jesus' message, he's laying down his life every single time for us. When we erred, right? When we do something that is against God's laws, and we're giving a second, a third, a fourth chance, whether it's the same thing or not that we're persisting on or not, right? Isn't that giving life every time? It's like a kid. You have a little kid and you say 1,000,000 times, right? Every single time you're giving that, sigh of, okay, it's going to happen. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's that persistent, right? That some of us don't have. Right? I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a higher hand and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters the flock. Let us think of taking our kid, since we use that analogy, to the daycare. Yeah, of course the daycare will do everything that they in their hands, but I guarantee you, we can pay whatever money to that daycare or to that individual to take care of our kids. It will never be the same, right? It's like when we clean our houses, right? And we ask somebody else to clean. No matter what you do, it's not going to be the same, right? Or we can picture something that we do so well in our lives that delegating that task to someone else, just the mere thought of delegating that task or asking somebody to do it, it's like, no, I'll give you one, because it's actually something very that helps me and is a therapy to me, cutting my grass. Oh, why don't you? No, don't even mention, because that is like, to me, is like taking away a piece of me, right? And that is my moment that I actually kind of relax. I connect with nature and all that. I relax and I do. I mean, it's labor, it's physical work, but it's something that I like, right? Now, can I ask someone? Sure, but I guarantee you, it's not going to be the same, because I know the corners of my little lot, right? That I need to get to, the things that I need to attend to, and I do with joy. Again, being exposed to the sun, to the environment, and all. I love that, right? And each one of us have our moments, right? So it's the same thing. If we were to put ourselves in that position, it is not the same thing as the shepherd taking care of us, right? He flees because he's a higher hand and does not care about the sheep. It doesn't have the same value. And I'd like to say here, to take a step back and say, it's not that this individual or this situation allows, or of course it's not wrong, if you are giving something to take care of, we should, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but it's not the same value. Cutting the grass to me does not have the same value to you guys. The same thing that if you have something in your life that you cherish a lot, doesn't have the same value to me. There's a double side. This creates two feelings, right? One is that it allows us to understand that we're on different levels. Even though we're marching here on planet Earth, we're different levels in several areas, right? So that gives us the ability to understand the other side, and also helps us understand ourselves when we say, this person was laughing about this joke, but it wasn't funny to me. This person sees this situation so detrimental, but we're going to get through it, right? So it doesn't have the same value, as well as something that perhaps at times there are these individuals that are hired and we follow them. They are placed into our lives and we are told to follow them, right? Isn't that what social media does to us today? They are hired for us to follow the masses. Follow this, do this. Everybody's buying this, we go and follow. And the moment that we are in despair because we don't have the means to continue in their life, in that process, whatever that is, they flee. They're out of our lives. And who comes to rescue? Right? So again, I'm going back and forth so we can understand what are these robbers? What are these thieves? Right? I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own knows me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Here is for some of us, may not have the same value, right? But this is one of the critical parts of the parable. The shepherd knowing us. It's like me asking Kirsten about Rafael, how he will react if you say no, if you say yes, if you give him chocolate. She knows exactly what's going to happen, right? He has how old is he? Almost five. He has no concept, as a child, understanding of God. But she connects him to God, right? Through her motherly love. Through the care that she has to say no, no, yes, yes, right? So it is that connection. So the connection that we have with Christ ought to be this, right? This is the way for me to get closer and closer to our Creator. Through any other way, there may be a way, but it's not going to be the same. And there is more that we're going to talk about that as well. So I hope that we now get this better understanding of what the shepherd is doing in our lives, what the shepherd is, what it's doing in our lives, and us as the sheep, right? Moving on to verse 16. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice, and they will become one flock with one shepherd. This is beautiful. And I had to really think about this, resort to some friends actually speaking, writing on through the light of Spiritism as well, and outside of Spiritism to understand this. And there are two elements that I would like to bring to us over here. One, it's easier, before we go into it, remember, he was talking to the Pharisees, right? Were the Pharisees happy when he said this? No. Like, what is this guy talking about? What is he really, trying to say, right? He's possessed, right? And it created dissension, right, between them. So I can think of, perhaps, I would say the majority, right? Saying, because when we're in a group of people, it's very hard for us to, even though our hearts are touched, it's very hard for us to go against the crowd, right? So it's easier for us to go ahead and accept what the crowd is following because it's convenience, right? It's mainly convenient for us to think, okay, you know what? Yeah, I'll go with the crowd. If everybody believes on this, I'll go with that. But there was a doubt on some of them to say, wait a minute, he wouldn't be speaking of such a thing if he was possessed. He's actually trying to tell something or alert us of something that we need to rethink about it. Even though I'm not, at that time, there were no such a thing of, a Christian yet, but maybe I need to follow this man. Maybe I need to give a second thought of this. And that little second thought was actually what perhaps was a pivotal moment for a reincarnation or a couple reincarnations after for those Pharisees to wake up and say, now I remember what Jesus told us back in the day, right? And many of us are here, right? But let's try and understand a little bit of this. In the Genesis, chapter 18, number 17, we get the following. Fraternity must be the cornerstone of the new social order. However, there can be no true, solid, and effective fraternity unless it rests upon an unshakable foundation. That foundation is faith. Not faith in these or those particular dogmas, which change with the times and peoples who cast stones at one another, because by anathematizing one another, they feed hostility. But faith in the fundamental principles that everyone can accept. God, the soul, the future. The ongoing progress of the individuals and the perpetuity of relationships among them. When all of these, when all people are convinced that God is the same for all, that this supremely just and good God cannot want anything unjust, that evil comes from humans and not from God, then they will regard one another as children of the same Father and will shake hands with one another. This is the faith that Spiritism provides and which will be from here on, out the pivot around which humankind will move, whatever the mode of worship and the particular creed may be. So this foundation that there's only one God, and this God is the good God for all of us, no matter if you're a Jew, no matter if you're a Christian, no matter if we're a Spiritist, no matter if from this will be the foundation for all of us, right? We'll stop right there so we can continue. Another beautiful passage from this book, two passages from this book, The Invisible. Unfortunately, not in English yet, from Leonardo, No Invisível. It says the following. The new spiritualism, in this case, he's referring to Spiritism, already links adherents of all classes and all countries. One day, it will link all religions, all human societies. And then he goes on to say, in this chapter, the human soul will learn to know itself in his immortal nature, in his eternal future. In its eternal future. Spirits passing through the earth we will understand that our destiny is to live and progress incessantly through the infinity of spaces and time, in order to initiate ourselves more and more in the wonders of the universe, to cooperate ever more closely in the divine work. This passage right here is what gives, it's pretty much the heart of that saying that we hear in Spiritism. Spiritism is not the religion of the future, but future of all religions, right? Perhaps we have heard of that. I couldn't find it. I don't think Leonardo said it, but through his explanations, we see that through what Spiritism brings to us, it will become the future of all religions. So if we can think about it, perhaps that a Jew, right, or someone of another faith, right, they will continue to follow the teachings of whatever master they understand. But because they understand that there is consequences to whatever we do here, and we will reincarnate to have to fix the issues that we have created, we're going to think about it. Perhaps, yeah, Leo is a spiritist, but I'm going to treat him like my brother, like he is part of my family, whether I believe in spiritism or not. But the precepts, and we're going to see here, that spiritism brings to us is going to be, right, the same for all of us. That is why when we go back and we read the passage, the item 16, and I have other sheep that are not of this fold, I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice, and they will become one flock with one shepherd. It's right here. It's what Spiritism already bringing to us, is the fraternity that we see in Genesis, saying that that's going to be the cornerstone of our life, right? Same God, right? The understanding on how we continue. We're in this lifetime, in this physical presence right now, but we're spirits, right? Giving continuation. He finalizes and says, "For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life so that I may take it back. No one has taken it away from me, but I lay it down on my own. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it back. This commandment I received from my Father." Dissension occurred again among the Jews because of these words. Many of them were saying, "He has a demon and is insane. Why do you listen to him?" Others were saying, "These are not the words of one who is demon-possessed. A demon cannot open the eyes of those who are blind, can it?" So it's a question. It goes back again to the teaching that we brought from the Spirit's book, right? Jesus as the best example that God has offered us, right? It was given to him, and no one can take that from him. This title, no matter what we see in the world today, the dissensions, the craziness that is going on, the attacks on the family institution, the attacks on being a good individual, right? Being a good and responsible person, because we're not following the masses, right? It will come, it shall pass. Don't know when, don't know how, but it shall pass, right? And when we go and see the attack is why? Because we are using the teachings that we have received in the past for our benefits. Whenever I want to take advantage of something for the convenience of my living or of my way of life, guess what? It shall pass. It will not be as long as we see spirituality, I would like to say, or perhaps the teachings that have remained with us. There is a passage of, I can't remember what book. I don't know if it's After the Storm. I can't remember now. But Joanna de Angelis reminds us that is what we see in terms of history, right? What happened to Christianity. Even with the destructive minds behind Christianity, the craziest thing that we have seen to impose Christianity on others, the message stands still. The master stands still. There was no change. For some of us, yeah, we have created a lot of enemies, a lot of difficult moments that we still have to, let's say, rescue, right? And that's going to be down the road, way down the road, right? Because right now, what we see is just the beginning, right? Way down the road, we're still going to have to face our difficulties that we have created in the past. And I say we because if we're here in this position today, I like to consider myself one of those, right? That did not understand. Much like we see the Pharisee not understanding what Jesus said the first time. I hope this is helpful because it brings us a sense of alert. It brings also a sense of awareness that it helps us clarify things in our lives and be a little more patient to ourselves, but most importantly, also be very persistent, right? Continue on saying, perhaps, we're here together and we need to do a little bit more, right? And really question. When somebody says, "Oh, don't you think it's crazy that you're doing this?" Well, right there. Others were saying, these are not the words of the demon possessed. A demon cannot open the eyes of those who are blind, can it? So if we have inside of us that we're doing truly the good for others, good for ourselves, and good for others, guess what? We need to continue. Whether others question or not, we have to make sure that we are continue on. These are the tenets of Spiritism, the 5 tenets of Spiritism. And I like to bring this because it really connects with 3 elements of this parable. 3 elements that we mentioned that also I didn't really grasp at first, but again, through the study, through the reading of it, I came to realize as well. Number 1, the shepherd gives life. Much like a father, a mother, a true educator will give life for that loved one, right? I hear mothers, I hear parents saying, I would give my life for this, right? I would give our, well, this is important, but also we have to keep alive. We have to stay alive. So if anything, we're going to give life, but we're going to stay alive, right? Not only on the true sense of the word, but we're all going to stay alive, but we give our lives to it, right? We give our tears, sweat, and blood to it, right? So the shepherd gives life. Number 2, the shepherd knows the sheep. Even though there's another flock inside of that sheepfold, knows that the flock. Much like the mother knows how the kid will react, right? That connection that comes from other lives, right? Other existence, right? Or perhaps the father, right? And sometimes us kids or our kids, we don't understand. We only give value when we lose it or perhaps when it's too late, right? And we hear that voice inside of us. I told you so, right? Don't do it, right? So the shepherd will know its sheep. The third one, the shepherd, and this is how we start connecting with this. The shepherd knows God, is connected with God. What does that tell us? Anything that we can say perhaps would be example that speaks more than words, right? Being a good individual. Try to do the best we can. Not jump the sheepfold. Enter through the front door. Give good example. You don't even have to say the word. They will just follow. If you say the word, for sure they will. But they know you. They can smell you, right? And that is through good example. We can go beyond this or against this at all and try to be that shepherd. And that's why Spiritism comes with these tenets. It says the existence of God. If we don't have that in our lives, if we don't have that in our hearts, guess what? We're not going to even be able to move to the other areas, which is the other tenets, which is the immortality of the soul. If I don't believe on a God that is just to all of us, right? How can I believe in the immortality of the soul? That we are eternal, right? The plurality of existence, many existence. If we don't believe in the immortality of the soul, how can we then believe in the plurality of existence in terms of reincarnation, right? The other planets, we study together several of these teachings, especially with Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, of other planets coming and helping us. The spirits from these other planets come and helping us. And that is another emphasis as well that we have heard from other scholars, that Jesus is also responsible for other planets beyond. This is again Leo entering here. Please don't, right? This is a speculation that Jesus is also responsible for other planets, so much so that he has the power, in terms of moral power, to come and say, now that you understand, let's come over here and help the earth-bound ones to become a little bit better. And we hear Manuel Filomeno de Miranda saying, these spirits, they're coming from another location, so we don't go into detail, to help us as they reincarnate. They are so advanced that their moral advancement will incite us to be the same, or at least to aspire to be as more as they are. and the communicability of the spirits. We go back to have different types of beliefs, right? And religious beliefs, I say, and think about in terms of when all of these religions, they start accepting these things, right? Joana de Angelis will not come only as Joana de Angelis. Joana de Angelis will perhaps present herself as Juana de Esbar from Mexico, right? Just things that it crosses my mind that I was thinking that when Jesus mentions to us that he will get also these other flocks that are still not with him yet under the same guidance, right? It's not the imposing idea of Christianity as we have tried to do in the past, but the more advancement that we allow ourselves to enter, as well as to help others understand. And Spiritism will guide us through it. As I mentioned, not the religion of the future, but the future religions. Now, as I present this, it's very hard to see. As I present this picture to you, we're coming to an end here. What do you see here that is different from what we presented? What is the element that we see? The dog. We haven't talked about it. It was not on the parable. Huh? No, this is a dog. This is a dog right here. Thank you, Julie. It's hard to see. Right, it's the shepherd. We know that we are the sheep, right? We know that we are not yet the shepherd. One day, as Jesus promised us that we can do whatever he did and much more, we will become a Christ-like spirit. As we evolve millions of years, one day we'll get there. But until then, here's what I would like to present to you. Let us be the shepherd, the little shepherd. One thing that I would like to utilize over here, that is in John 21st, chapter 21 of John, verses 15 through 17, for us to finalize. When they had finished eating, Jesus says to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said, yes, Lord. He said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord. You know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. Here's us with all this knowledge that we have, being called to feed, to take care, to guide, to be the teacher, to be the father, to be the mother, right? To be the educator, that many times those who are receiving the education, they don't like it. They will just kind of push it aside, but we have to be persistent, right? It's the mother saying with love, it's the father saying a little bit more abrupt, sometimes calling their attention, right? The way we present things have our own right taste that sometimes we don't know. You know, I go back and I look at the teachings that I've received from my father, and I still receive, thank God, because he's still here with me. The teachings that I received from my mother, right? They were completely different. Some of them were like, okay, that was easy enough to understand. Some of them was like, I don't want to do this, right? And then they say it again, and they said it again, and they still say it, right? They still look at us, and I say it us because I have two siblings. They still look at us as the children, right? That little baby, right? Because that's how they see us, and that's their work. Sometimes we have to say, wait a minute, all right, I can take care of this. Let me be, right? In a nice way. But we look at those moments and we see them as the little shepherd. No, come over here. No, watch. Because, I mean, the picture doesn't give, but this is a little kind of like a waterway type of thing, a little river there. Be careful, you can fall there. And the dog is doing that work. So the invitation is for us to become this little dog. Yet we're not the shepherd, but we're the little German shepherd. I actually went into a tangent and studied this yesterday, and there were several breeds that does an amazing job as the shepherd, right? And they have specific breeds that they're very attentive to what the shepherd, the actual shepherd, teaches them to take care of the sheep. It's an amazing thing. But that was not something, perhaps, that we had developed at Jesus' time. Because I'm quite sure that if that was available then, if we had that knowledge then, he would have utilized as well. Maybe not. I'm just extrapolating now here with my thoughts and my feelings. But it is God telling us, Jesus telling us, feed my sheep, take care of my sheep. Because our kids, they are not ours. They're God's. Because our friends, they're not ours, right? They come and go in our lives. And they only take the best of us, at least what we present to them, right? Once more, for us to, just to kind of, a little teaser for us to go and read, Emmanuel comes and tells us in this beautiful chapter 47 of the book, Estude e Viva, or Study and Live, says the following: taking pity on our ignorance, divine providence decided to send someone to instruct us in the ways of elevation. And Jesus, the sublime governor of the terrestrial planet, came in person to explain to us that God does not ask for flattery or pomp, nor victims, nor holocaust, but a heart full of fraternity at the service of good, so that the earth opens up finally to the glory and happiness of his kingdom. Let us be this little German shepherd, right? Like this beautiful dog here on the picture, so that we can be part of this flock in a higher way, not just be the sheep. Sometimes we need to be guided. We need to listen, as Jeanette mentioned at the beginning, right? One of the teachings. But if we have all these teachings, we ought to be in a position already, I would like to say so, to be some of the ones that are also helping guide, right? It doesn't have to be us going and preaching to the masses or saying things that perhaps will do, incredulous things. No, day-to-day work, right? Being a hard worker in all sense of the word, right? To work physically, to work at home, to work to become a better individual, right? So that at least we can also be the individual remembered and say, he never jumped the window. He never jumped the sheepfold. He went through the front door. And he led me through in and out the front door, right? So that's what we would like to offer with this beautiful message. Again, please read it. Please study. If there is not something that it doesn't excite you much right now, hopefully there will be as you read, as you study more. But I would like to go ahead and finalize here and with a big thank you and open up for questions or comments that we may have about this beautiful parable. Don't have anything? But I have a question. Okay.
Hello, thank you. It's a very interesting parable, as all parables from Jesus, right? I was wondering, especially when you explained that Jesus is the good shepherd and that he's the dog keeper, right? Like the example that you showed, and also mentioned that all the sheep need to go through him. I was wondering how people that are not Christians, I know that you touch a little bit about this, or that never heard about these parables, how they react to that, like in terms of if they belong to other religion. So even if you have to, because it seems that Jesus self-proclaimed him as the good sheep, and I'm not saying that that's not true, but it's easy for me to accept this type of teachings. What about the other people that are not raised in Christianity or probably not going to become Christian this time? So how will you take that?
Very good question. We were studying sometime. I believe it was, when was it? Last Sunday. Last Sunday, yeah. The fifth chapter of the book, The Messengers, right? And on the book, there is a great point raised by the mentor who is speaking to a group of individuals or spirits in the spirit realm, obviously, saying that there are many friends, brothers, and sisters from other religions that see Spiritists, or at the time when that was written 50 years ago, right? When was it written again? The Messenger? 41, right? That they did, yeah. 44. Okay. So if you think about it, this was written then, right? So this is an account from André Luiz that had already happened. So the book was written in 1944, but that probably happened before. So the mentor was addressing an idea of, how much Spiritist or Spiritist and Spiritism in its nature was being attacked by, Christianity, or all the Christian-based religions, and some other religions as well, the Protestants and whatnot, the way they see on how they ought to help or organize themselves and whatnot. And one thing that came to mind was the following. It was true, and it's still true, because people don't understand. People see Spiritism, the communicability of the Spirit, as something evil, right? Because Moses, a long time ago, said this is bad, because we were doing things with it that it was not for the good, of humanity. It was to satisfy something that we have inside of us. Now, then it comes Chico Xavier. Then it comes other Spiritists. Then it comes Divaldo Franco, right? And many others. I would like to include as well Miss Maria, that became a Spiritist. That was a Protestant, or was a Catholic, right? But diligently start to work her life toward the benefit of others. These individuals, not through preaching, not through pushing down Spiritism, on someone's throat, or wherever they live, they help change society. They help society to see Spiritism with different eyes. Through what? Charity. Through hard work. To consideration, right? Perhaps those individuals then will say, okay, you know what? Miss Maria, from the corner, that lives in the corner, she is a Spiritist, but she's so nice. Why is she so, kind to people, even though she's a Spiritist? So why am I saying this, Daniel? Because through good deeds, through us changing, right? Christians, and I say Christian, I also encompass us as Christian, because we follow teachings, Christ's teaching, not because we're following this or that dogma or this or that church, but through our good deeds at work, at home, when we go to school, when we come to the center, for sure, then we present ourselves the best, right? But in our day-to-day lives, we will help change society. Then some individuals will look at us and say, wow, if that is making a difference in Leo's life, guess what? Let me give it a thought. And perhaps it will be like those individuals that kind of went under conflict, right? To say, this guy is with Demo or something, But then some other will be like, wait a minute. He wouldn't be talking about charity if he was possessed. He wouldn't have a word of consideration towards others if he was possessed. So to answer your question, I believe that as we change morally, and that is a big jump. When I say morally, it's everything. Then people will see Christianity in a different way, thus seeing Christ as well as the guide and model. Because the things that we have done through the church, and against ourselves, it was horrible. So it is very hard for somebody who has inside of them, through their reincarnatory plan still, some attacks of the church imposed on them. It's hard for them to swallow Christianity now, right? We see the 1 second, Daniel. We see the difficult things that we have imposed on others through the Crusades. It's hard for those individuals to accept Christianity now. So it will take time. It will take a lot of work.
Yeah, so before I go to the question on the chat, I think I have two questions, one from probably Kiss and the other one from Yasu. So just to summarize this, the key here is the behavior,
Yes.
right? We believe that, okay, because of many translations, and it's not that when Jesus said, "Follow me," or "I'm the doorkeeper," when he put everything in himself, he was talking about the way he behaves
Mhm.
towards the
Yes.
human being, toward others, right?
Perfect
And
point.
I think that's a good way to engage. And because of this, I would like to pose the next question because it has to do
Sure.
with this talk. So you can, how can we communicate to others that Jesus, the Great Shepherd, and help them to comfort by the notion that we are all deeply loved? It seems like we live in a world with so much despair. I think it has to do what you just have said,
Mhm.
right? But if you wanted to expand on that,
No, it is very, I mean, it's part of what we just mentioned. It is through behavior. It's not through the personification of the man carrying a cross, even though that man carrying a cross has a great value. And Manuel talks about it in many of his teachings on the different books that he brings to us. But it's not just that, it's the work that he has done on the hearts of many, right? The hearts of the Pharisees and many other groups of Jews that perhaps didn't want to hear, and they still don't see him as the Savior, even though he was asked several times. It's not to present somebody, to present itself or himself as I am the Savior, but what else did Jesus do, right? What are the moments that um, uh, he changed someone's life? I'll have a great example, and the book is not here. Paul and Stephen. Paul. Let's just think of the life of a man who is I I lack the words to describe. He was completely against. He did everything to stop it, and he is renewed, right, with the teachings of the master. Not only because he didn't physically he wasn't physically with the master, and I say Jesus here, but he was touched from through others, right, that knew the master, that had already come in contact with the good news, right, and he did a completely change on his life. Mind you that it took some time for him to become Paul, not only changing the name, but going through the whole reconstruction of his life, reconstruction of his behavior, as Daniel summarized, in terms of saying, okay, now I have a different way of life. As well as, I like to add, that when he was being prosecuted by those who he prosecuted before. So it's not just the effort, you see? It's not just changing a name, it's just in change appearance, changing a white shirt to a blue shirt, right? But it's also the persistence, especially when those who you prosecuted before, they're now prosecuting you and afraid of you. But it is the moment, and I use now a part of the book that I also heard from another speaker when he was presenting this message as well, is the moment that he goes to the among with those eating, and when he was harbored by those who actually he prosecuted in the past, and gave him a piece of bread and something to drink, that he said, wow, this is what Jesus is, right? If they can accept me after what I did to them with an open heart, this is the message of the Christ, right? And still, after that, we have messed up several times. We have done really hard things to people in the name of Christ, in the name of God, and we still do, right? But it is this behavior. So I thank you, Daniel. I thank you for posting the question as well, in terms of how are we going to do this, right? So the work is hard. The work is, there's still a lot of work to do. We were talking about with a friend about emotions, right? Me of trying to understand emotions. Number one, English is a second language. It's hard to put a name or a title to an emotion, right? We don't know. We don't even know our emotions, right? It's hard to title them. We feel upset, but sometimes we're really angry, right? And there is a difference, right? So even understanding ourselves, our essence is different, let alone understand the essence of others and understand this true essence that is our Master Jesus. Kirsten.
Yes, so we have a question from Yasko. She says, hi, Leo, great topic for reflections. Verse 8, quote, all those who came before me are thieves and robbers. Who would they be? And I think she's saying, who do they represent?
Sure. Here's the thing. I don't like to call this or that or if they're wrong or not. And that is why we brought that second paragraph after the Spirit tells us who Jesus is, right? We like to say that many of us, including myself, have been in this position several times of my life. And because of my convenience, the convenience of life, or addressing my needs, I have failed, right? So many that have come before Christ, right, failed. And when he say before me, it doesn't mean that before he started preaching. It can be now. Think about it. The time here is different. Just put time aside. Leo comes and does something wrong to a person, right? That person is upset. That person is destroyed. Finds Jesus. Guess what? Leo came before Jesus. You see what I'm saying? So the time here is not the time, 2,000 years ago. Anybody who came 2,000 years before Christ, 2,000 years before Christ is here with us, reincarnated, right? But I'm talking about in the now as well. That we promise things for people, right? Robbing their energy, being the thief of their lives, right? And we destroy someone's life, right? And hopefully, because of the grace of God, they are presented to Jesus, and Jesus comes after the thief. Hope that helps understand, because we don't want to get caught up on that time essence there, that timeline there that is 2,000 years ago, right? Because many of us have been presented, and we are being presented these thieves nowadays, right? We see this day in and day out. Come this way, do this, follow this, right? Be this way, be that way. And we follow until we listen to the true shepherd and we go, right? Maybe the second or third time, not the first time, but we do follow. So I hope that helps, Yasko. There are many that came before, in fact, of Jesus 2,000 years ago, but we would like to bring that as far as in our daily lives as well.
Leo, may I make a comment
Sure.
on top of what you just said? It reminds me of, have you ever caught yourself saying to your children or child, no one's going to ever love you like your parents do? And when I think of this verse 8, I think about before Jesus, or before our notion of God, all others before, and as you said, after, will not love us as God or Jesus loves us. So that's just what came to my mind.
It's a great point. If I may continue with that comment, Kirsten, is that we ought to teach our children this, because Leo, as a father, not perfect yet. I'm not going to say about her because she's not in the room, but I try to remind my wife as well. You as a mother, you're not perfect yet. Great heart, does things that I cannot do yet, but not perfect. And when we have the humbleness to say that, to accept such a thing, and bring Jesus into their lives, we're halfway there. Number one, we take the weight that we cannot bear. Number two is to guide to the true shepherd, right? That's why take care of our sheep, feed my sheep, right? It's that little dog that we mentioned, right? Feed my sheep. If we can remind our kids of such a thing, I will do everything for you, but Jesus will do more. Because what if we discarnate? We don't know what's going to happen on the other side. I like to think that I'll be able to come back and visit, but we have seen otherwise. That because of our passions, if we come back, we're going to do more harm than good, right? So it's a great point that you bring this, Kirsten, because we ought to tell people the same thing. The Spiritist Center is the best thing that you can come, at least for me now, to have a meeting, to get to know new friends and whatnot. But have Jesus in your heart, right? Bring these teachings to you. Go ahead, Kirsten.
Isn't there somewhere in this parable, or whether you showed on the screen or not, but correct me if I'm wrong, there's a part that says something, maybe you can go back to it on your PowerPoint side, but it's something where when Jesus said, yeah, maybe you go back to it.
A little bit small, but what are you trying to remember?
When Jesus said something about, lay my life down. There we go. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life so that I may take it back. So it's just something that came to my mind. And while I also, too, was reading about this parable, it kind of brought to my mind this idea that, so we all know the historical or the history that's told through the ages that Jesus was crucified. He was killed by certain people or certain sect of people. But really, Jesus knew it was his choice to come here and to, quote unquote, die in that fashion to show us his love. So that just, to me, shows the power, the love that he had. And so this parable is such a great parable to share because it's such an immense reminder of his love for us. But great talk. Thanks, Leo.
It is. And I agree with you. I would just like to make a final. Is there any more questions, Daniel? I think she just says that great answer. Okay, I'm glad that helped, Yasko. But Kirsten, I would like to, as a teaser, did Christ have to die on the cross? He did it as a teaching for us. And I think there is no best way for us to see as a reaction in terms of being humble. All right, I will accept the will of the Father, right? But did he have to go through that? I'm posing this question, not saying Jesus didn't have to carry the cross. He did what he's supposed to do, and who am I to question Christ? But one thing we can do, we can question our actions back then and today on what we did to put Jesus on the cross. So did Jesus have to die on the cross?
No, he did. I mean, in terms of did he need to go through that suffering? No, he did not.
Think about it.
It was a choice.
And here's the thing. Now let's take, the teachings is, if you feed someone who's hungry, you're feeding me. If you clothe someone who doesn't have anything to wear, you're clothing me, right? These are the teachings. I forget where now, right? But if you think about it, if we put him on the cross, do we have to do that? We can go the other way. We can say, you know what, if anything, let me take the burden with you. Let me help you, right? Let me help my brother and sister, right? Let's not put Christ on the cross when we are not doing these things, when we are leaving aside all the good that we can do, when we are stopping progress of the earth because we are not being good sheeps, or we're not being the good shepherd, right? So that's why I laid the question. I'm glad that you bring this. These are things that we can think about it when we are presented with a situation that we have to humble ourselves. And yet, we also have to carry those crosses, right? We complain. That's okay. That's our level right now, right? We put that aside and then, okay, let's go on now, right? Sometimes it's even funny, right? You're complaining too much. Come on, let's move on, right? But it is life. But I like to, help us, because these things come to mind. Sometimes it's like, wow, didn't have to go through that, right? We don't have to continue to do that. So with that, I would like to thank everyone, listening to this. Hopefully this will also guide the hearts and minds of many of our brothers and sisters looking at this parable and seeing, who are we, right? Who is this master? What is the sheepfold, right? Where are we going? What is these other flocks of sheep that are not with us yet? And Jesus is saying, they're going to come with us, right? They're going to be with us soon. So just a word of encouragement, if anything, from our master again, and being with you here, bringing this understanding, hopefully, also makes me really happy. So thank you. And we're going to move on to our second part.